Good morning. Welcome to the Morning Outlook here on Kalkine TV. I'm Sage. The Australian share market is set for subdued start on Thursday, with the SPI futures pointing to a weaker open, down 54 points or 0.76%. On Wednesday, the Aussie market rose by 0.36% with downward pressure from the major banks, and over the past week it is down 1.63%. The US stocks closed the session on the lower side, being weighed down by rising energy prices and bond yields, making the big banks and industrial entities among the biggest laggards on the overall market. Wells Fargo fell 1.8% and Union Pacific shed 3.1%. Technology stock Intel lost 5.3% on the back of a negative broker report, and the overall Philadelphia Semiconductor SE index was down 2.4%. US share markets gave back most of their gains made from the previous day on Wednesday. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen testified at the Senate Finance Committee on Tuesday, where she explained that inflation will remain elevated and her priority was to reduce the pressure. This supports expectations that the Fed, in their meeting next week, will raise its key short-term interest rate by 0.5 percentage point, allowing the Fed to slow economic growth in order to limit the impact of rising inflation. Although post-pandemic recovery witnessed an increase of demand for goods, with supply chain and production units unable to keep up, there are concerns of stagflation due to the Fed's hawkish stance, however. Bond yields continued their march higher overnight in anticipation of the ECB meeting and release of US CPI figures. Interesting to note, the US Treasury sold $33 billion of 10-year notes at 3.03% into tepid or neutral demand. It's been reported that every $10 billion created by the Fed has the potential to turn into $90 billion, depending on the level of demand. And 10-year yields rose 5 points to near 3.02%. The 2-year yields rose as well by 4 points to near 2.78%. And the US Dow Jones dropped 0.8% or 269.24 points to 32,910.90. The US S&P 500 shed 1.1% or 44.91 points to 4,115.77, and the Nasdaq dropped as well 0.7% or 88.961 points to 12,086.27. In other US economic data, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association, mortgage applications were on the decline, falling by 6.5% in the past week. It's obvious the higher bond yields are taking a toll on technology stocks. Shares in chipmaker Intel fell by 5.3%. And moving on, it was a mixed trade for the sectors with an even split, 6 in the green and 6 in the red. And the sector movers from the US overnight include energy minerals being up 24.78% and utilities being up as well 6.23%. And the worst performer was consumer durables, down 8.79%, and retail trade was down as well 4.64%. The companies that performed the best were Alibaba Group Holdings, up 14.79%, Las Vegas Sands Corp up 4.35%, Wynn Resorts Limited up 4.18%, and the worst performers were Altria Group, down 8.37%, and Carnival Corp Holdings down as well 6.17%. Over to the European market now. And the European share markets also declined on Wednesday. Credit Suisse announced the probability of group-wide losses in Q2 of 2022. Shares in Credit Suisse fell as much as 7% but ended 3.8%. Up by the close. The profit warning is weighing on the banking sector, which fell overall by 0.9%. However, the European retailers rose by 2.1%. And the Pan-European Stock 600 index lost 0.6%. The German DAX index fell by 0.8%, and the UK FTSE index eased by 0.1%. Shares of Rio Tinto fell by 0.4%, and BHP was trading down by 0.2% in the London trade. Onto the global oil prices, and oil prices moved up overnight by the close to about 3%, instigated by the increased demand on the tight supplies. The Brent crude price rose by 3.01 or $3.01 US being 2.5% to reach $123.58 a barrel. They are expecting parabolic increases in the global oil market sometime this year. It was reported by Reuters that US commercial crude oil inventories rose unexpectedly last week, while crude in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve fell by a record amount as refiners' inputs rose to their highest since January 2020. And on to the gold market now. The gold futures price rose by $4.40 US, or 0.2%, to US $1,856.50 an ounce. Spot gold was trading at close to $1,853 an ounce at the end of the US session. And the iron ore futures price rose by 7 US cents, being under 0.1%, to reach $145.88 a tonne. The BNPL sector has been on a downward trend since February 2021, with most major stocks reducing by close to 80% in the share price. A trend started by Block Inc.'s purchase of Afterpay, the Australia and New Zealand leader in the sector, and they're planning on introducing Block's Cash App in time. Sezzle Inc. was down 13.04%, and Zip is looking at a merger with the smaller competitor Sezzle in the near future to attract large US merchants in the aim to generate increased cash flow as we approach 2024. In other mergers in the sector, Australia's Latitude Group Holdings Limited is considering the acquisition of Hum Group Limited. And Netflix Inc. rallied, closing the session up about 2.12% to reach $202.83, still being about $498 under its 52-week high garnered on November the 17th last year, being closer to $700. And Netflix outperformed the market expectations and competitor Amazon on Wednesday, with Amazon.com Inc. stock decreasing 1.48% to $121.18. Walt Disney Co. also fell 0.42% to reach $107.34. Thanks for joining us on the morning's report. Hope your day in trading goes well, and do keep watching for more of the live expert talks and market insights. Sage here, signing off for now.